All right, so I'm making this video for those parents who are making the decision of whether or not to put their children in childcare or daycare or preschool or whatever you want to call it, right? But I'm making this video for those who have the option of whether they are going to do daycare or not, right? And I'm just providing this information as here are all the things that you should know if you're making this decision. Now, I'll just come out flat and say it. Daycare was created as a last resort for parents, right? And I'm going to give you everything behind that of like, if you're making this decision, what's something to consider, right? But this video is not for the parents who have no other choice. You have to put your kid in daycare and you don't have a family member to watch, or you have no other opportunity to stay at home with your kids or anything like that. If you're watching this and you're in that position, you're likely just going to be upset by the end of this video. This is for the parents who they have the opportunity to say, do I want to stay at home, or do I want mom to stay at home, or do I want grandma or nanny to watch the child, or do I want to put them in daycare or preschool, whatever you want to call it, right? This is to help you out because there are a lot of parents who believe that the decision is just as simple as what is my preference, right? What is my preference? Do I prefer daycare? Do I prefer staying home? Or do I prefer grandma watching or whatever? However, it's not an equal playing field at all whatsoever. Some things that you should know going into this is if your child is between the ages of 0 and 24 months, let's say, right? So between the ages of 0 and 24 months, they say childcare may improve cognitive skills. So these are some things that parents are thinking when they're putting their kids in school. Oh, they're going to be social. They're going to have, more cognitive skills. They're going to develop faster, all those things, which are things that you can do at home, by the way. But you may get an incremental bump in cognitive skills. However, that has been shown to fade, right? That has been shown to fade with time. That cognitive skill bump does not stay. But what does stay is that it has a negative effect on behavior later on, and that seems to stay permanently, right? A negative effect on behavior. There is no boost to social skills, none at all whatsoever, right? And the reason for that is because children from 0 to 2.5 are not actually playing with each other. In fact, around 2.5 is when they start to play next to each other. That's called parallel play, right? Um, they will play next to another child, but that doesn't mean that they will actually play together. It's not until they're about 3 years old where they begin to actually start playing with each other. Up until this point, a 1-year-old will play with their caretaker, the adult in the room, and they'll play a game of give and take, whether that's with a physical object or with words or things like that. But they're not getting quote unquote social development at this young stage. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. From 0 to 12 months, daycare likely damages cognitive skills, and children's later behavior at school is even worse, and there is no boost to social skills. Compared to 15 to 30 hours or more a week before 4 doesn't give any cognitive benefits, but makes children more likely to act out and be angry when they reach school. This is super important. Okay, this is super important because they say that putting your child in daycare for more than 30 hours a week is the equivalent of having a moderately depressed mother. Okay, that is huge because the effect that it will have on the child is going to come home upset. You're going to have a harder time parenting that child. You're going to lose connection with that child. And quite frankly, children don't want to be in an environment like that away from their parents, especially for that long. Okay. Um, there are some other really cool things that are going on here too. Oh, here it is. Children spending long hours in any kind of out of home education have been found to be 3 times as likely to have elevated levels of aggression. Now, when it comes to, hey, my child's going to get some cognitive boost or um, development from going to preschool or going to daycare, here's what the facts say. And this is all based on research for many decades. And if you'd like that research, I'll put a link in the description below that will link to an article that has all of these resources sourced, right? So you can go and read through them yourself. But parents are thinking that they're going to get some sort of cognitive boost by putting their kid into preschool or into daycare. But the reality is parents have more of an impact on their child's cognitive skills and their cognitive development than what they're going to get at school or at preschool or daycare, right? But the daycare actually affects the child's behavior more than the parents. And so, if there is a behavior development going on at the preschool or at the daycare, that's going to have a bigger impact on the child than what the parent's going to influence that behavior to be, because they're being surrounded by other kids who are acting either in a similar way, or you don't know how the teachers, I'm putting that in quotes because they're not actual teachers, they're just literally children or young adults who are hired uh, at the drop of a dime, because the turnover rate is just so high in preschools and daycares. But um, you don't know how that person's actually going to interact with your child and what behaviors they may be influencing within your child. This is all really important stuff, because you may get your child back home and you're like, I don't recognize who you are, who you're being right now, how you're acting right now, because they've been influenced by others in that environment. And by the way, as an aside, one of the things that majorly affects behavior is you're not getting one-on-one attention when you're in these settings. As a daycare, you want to make a profit, right? And so you don't want to have a one-to-one ratio of adult to child. That just doesn't make sense. You want to maximize how many children legally that you can have in a room with an adult. And so that often means, like here in the state of Florida, if you've got 2 year olds, you want to have 11 2 year olds to your one teacher, because that's the ratio that you can have, right? So if you're considering that, if you've ever been in a room with a 2 year old or with more than one 2 year old, 11 2 year olds is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You are not getting the attention that a 2 year old really needs, right? And the other thing alongside that is, well, if that 2 year old's not getting that attention, then they're going to act out in ways to get that attention. And in these settings, the only person that gets attention is the one who's behaving poorly, who's behaving what we would consider either aggressively or badly, or something that is going to get attention. Because if you're just a well-behaved child, you just kind of sit over there and the teacher's like, oh, that child's good. Let me tend to these other kids, right? You've heard the phrase squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? That is really true when it comes to children in these daycare settings who want this attention. The oil is the attention, and the squeakiness is them acting out in ways that they know is less than desirable. They know they wouldn't get away with at home, or that you wouldn't prefer at home, or they know that is not what the teacher wants in this setting, but it gets them the attention that they're looking for, right? With less adult attention in daycare, children learn to interact aggressively instead. A study finds around one incident of physical aggression every 9 minutes per child, and that's excluding play fighting, which in turn likely raises stress levels, which we're going to get to right now. So they did a study where they measured children's stress levels. They did a study where they measured their cortisol levels throughout the day, and children who are going to daycare for an entire day, their stress levels start to rise in the morning. Let me say this again. A normal pattern for cortisol levels throughout your day is you start off with a certain amount of cortisol, and then a normal pattern is it drops down throughout the day. Well, in daycare or in preschool, what happens is a child goes to preschool and their cortisol levels rise throughout the day. They are more stressed when they get home. Do you think that's going to have an interaction or an impact on the way that you interact with your children? Of course, right? And here's the other thing is as these cortisol levels go up, it depresses the immune system, which is a reason you've heard parents say all the time, oh, my kid's always sick. It's from daycare, all this, right? And kids are always sick in daycare. So are the teachers as well, because the kids are always getting sick. They're getting the teacher sick, and it just keeps going back and forth, back and forth. That's because cortisol levels, a rise in cortisol rather, decreases or suppresses the immune system, depresses the immune system. And so these kids are constantly getting sick. Now you know why. Now, kids get sick, right? That happens in your home as well. But it happens so much more. Ask any parent who's got their kid in daycare. It happens so much more when they're attending daycare. What are some of the reasons why a child's cortisol levels might rise in daycare? Because they're getting lack of attention. That is stressful for a child when they are not getting the attention that they need. That is stressful. And then they act out. And, if you're yelling, wailing at the top of your lungs to get attention, guess what? That's going to cause a rise in your stress levels, don't you think? Right. But also, uh, depending on the age of this child, if the child is a 1 year old, for instance, they may want to be held. Guess what? That does not happen in daycare settings because you're in a room. If you're the teacher, you're in a room of one teacher to potentially 6 1-year-olds, right? And if that's the case, you cannot possibly pick up every single 1-year-old all the time. Or you'd pick up one and then you'd spend your whole day picking up one after the other, after the other, after the other. You would never get a break. That would be back breaking. Okay. And by the way, these teachers don't get paid that much to be in these settings, right? They're typically paid the lowest of the low. I'll find another article, but uh, I've seen some research that shows that garbage men get paid more than uh, many teachers, or not just teachers, preschool workers specifically. Uh, who else? Locker room attendants or janitors get paid more than, and I'm not trying to downplay those other professions. I'm just saying, would you leave your child to, here in this state? In fact, in this state, there was a time period where fast food workers were getting paid more than preschool teachers or preschool workers who are with your child. And I'm just saying that because, um, well, these are the people that you're leaving your child with. Now, if you look at sort of that income level, and it's not as a judgment against these specific people, I'm just saying, would you leave your child with the same person who's working at McDonald's, for instance, or Burger King or something like that? Probably not. You probably wouldn't look at that person as trustworthy to leave your child with. But that is the uh, same income bracket level, the same skill level that is being employed at preschools. Okay, and again, it's not a judgment against those specific people. I'm just saying that is the skill level that's being employed there. Now, in this particular article that I'm referencing, uh, this author says that their friends always say that they've personally been lucky and found fantastic daycare settings. The sad thing is that researchers have found that nearly all parents rate their settings as great. Compared to trained observers, parents overrate infant toddler rooms by about 2 standard deviations. That's like saying you overrate height by 6 inches or IQ by 30 points. Now, all that said, obviously the best option is if you or your spouse can stay at home with your child full time. That is the best option. And then you can make play dates with other children, go to the park, things like that. But that is going to be the best option for your child. And specifically when we're looking at like cortisol levels, right? Now, we've seen in this research, it says, hey, listen, years later, the effect of this cortisol kind of drops down a little bit. right? But something I wanted to add in here is this. They did a observational study in Quebec where they were giving parents the ability to go to preschool, and I guess they were basically just paying for it. And then they watched what happened to these kids over years, and then they watched what happened to these kids as they grew up as well. And they found that this had a huge negative effect in Quebec, in Canada, right? For these children. These children who spent more than 0 hours in preschool or daycare, whatever you want to call it. These kids that spent more than 0 hours at daycare per week, or had long exposure in daycare, ended up becoming more likely to commit crimes against other people and more likely to have interactions with police and more likely to create crimes or were involved with crimes with personal property as well. So more theft, more damage to personal property, more aggression towards other people. It was just negative across the board, which just showed. And by the way, 25% of the schools within this area were considered good schools by uh, by professionals, right? Compared to only 10% in the US are considered good schools, right? So 25% were considered good schools, and it had this much of a negative effect on the society of Quebec. Okay. So that's just something to be aware of as well. If you're looking at long term, how is this going to affect my child? It's not just going to be something that is, oh, well, I got some extra hours at home for myself and I get to rest and they'll get a cognitive boost. That cognitive boost fades. And long term, this will have a negative effect on their behavior and, just their mental health, you know? So this should be a huge consideration if you're actually considering what's best for your child and not just what's convenient. Now, that can be completely avoided by giving them good care at home, you or your spouse, or if you have a family member that is going to take your direction, who's going to be actually present with your child, actually there, loving and caring. After a family member, the next best option is a nanny that comes to your home, that you trust, that you've given good direction to, that you can watch, and who's going to effectively work with your child. That is not an ideal option, by the way. That's just the next best after you, your spouse, a family member that you trust and is going to give your child really good, um, well, really good attention and really good care, right? After that is a nanny who's able to give them really good attention and care. And then after that, worst case scenario, you leave your child with someone who is running a daycare out of their own home. That is the worst case, but I would not recommend that actually. And then after that is obviously these large center daycares or preschools, whatever you want to call them. If those are options that you can avoid them because they have long-term negative effects for your child. The best option is for you or your spouse to be there with your child, especially in the first 3 years of life, first 4 years. And if you really want my take on it, you could just avoid childcare, preschool, even school altogether, right? But that's another subject for another time. But I wanted to make this video so that you understand what the actual options are and what their weights are, what their consequences are, and what would be the best thing for your child. Because oftentimes we make decisions because we're influenced by media or what everybody else is doing, but not necessarily really seeing what is the best thing. If you were making a decision of how you wanted to travel to a place, you could travel by plane, you could travel by car, you could travel by train, by boat, whatever. You'd want to see, well, what are my options? What are the best options? Okay, well, if I travel by plane, I can get there a lot quicker. But I'll have to go through security, and each person has to pay for a ticket, etc. If I travel by car, everyone can just pitch in for gas, but it's going to take me so much longer. You would weigh out, okay, what are the benefits of this? What are the cons of this, right? But that seems to be missing when it comes to specifically childcare, which is so huge, so important. And it's because we've been, I would say, deliberately misled by the media and all the information that's out there, readily available to the public, even though this research is out there. But what's readily available to the public seems to just guide people to, you just put your kid in daycare. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But the reality is, it is a big deal for your child and for your relationship with your child later on, and how they develop cognitively, all of that, because they're going to get the best cognitive development actually at home with you, the best behavioral development at home with you, and the best relationship with you, lower stress levels as well at home with you. You're not going to be having to fight with your child with their behaviors later on, and just cause a tension between you and your child, or a contentious relationship, right? I was trying to say both of those words at once. If you'd like this article to see it for yourself and go through it for yourself, I'm going to be doing more videos on this, but if you'd like this article for yourself, it's going to be linked in the comments. If you have any questions about, hey, what can I do to boost cognitive development at home? Or what can I do about these certain behaviors at home? You can also send me a message, and there's a link in the description as well. So you can send me a message, and I'd be happy to answer that for you. All right. Give your child the best, because we can. All right. See you guys later. Bye.